So right now, as things stand, the government of national unity has no comprehensive vision strategic document that they can present for the administration. Do you guys want Julius Malema to have cash in his sofa and then for parliament to be able to block this?
Yeah.
Because if you don't want it for Julius Malema, why do you want it for someone else? They matter when it's Zuma who didn't go to the Zondo Commission. But when Vodacom doesn't pay Makate, did we swap the judges or what? Cardinal pillars, you name it. Then I'm like, okay, so if this is your brain trust, so to speak, if you are the curator, the marks of this particular thing, why is any other vehicle a better vehicle for you at this particular juncture?
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today we're extremely excited once again to be joined by YouTuber extraordinaire and analyst Mighti Jamie. And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is getting a bit crazy. Like,
yeah.
No ways.
I'm telling you. Sizwe, I'm here to announce that I've looked at the vehicles. BMW, I've looked at Mercedes, Audi, and the best vehicle that I can see to achieve the progressive, revolutionary, pan-African agenda. Squazam Konto. I'm telling you, when you look at BMW, it's just too performance focused. You understand what I'm saying? And then when you look at Mercedes, it's too elitist. What we need is a something vehicle. One that is all encompassing and that can gwaza the way to where we need to go. So
Wow.
I've decided also to join the progressive Pan-Africanist movement.
We got you. We got you.
Admit
it, we got you. You thought at the beginning it was another MK reveal.
It seems like this is where the drops are happening.
Hey,
so I thought.
So might as well.
No, guys. Okay, let's continue with the episode.
No, you're part of MK now, forever. You're never getting out of this. Mighti Jamie, bro. After that brief digression, the only way you can deal with these things is humor.
Yeah, people always wonder why I love humor as a tool for communication. Life is short. We can't be too serious about these things. We've always got to find spaces and places to have a little laugh.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that we can do as a community. We can't be acting like we're eating concrete everywhere. You know what I mean?
So true. And South Africa is it's a tragic place. It's an unequal place, but it's a funny place too.
Yeah,
and
humor gets us through.
We find the humor. So welcome back, brother.
Pleasure.
This GNU, how are you assessing and understanding it? What's your take on the success or failure of the GNU so far?
So the first thing that I want to say about the GNU is that for me, it's still amazing how this was a product of two entities. One, donors, and two, the media. So why do I say this? When you look at the published donations, and I try to look at them holistically for the last 3 years, since 2021, when they started publishing those financial donations. And you see interesting patterns, right? You see the Oppenheimers making contributions to particular entities. You see the founder of Capitec, Michel Leroux, making contributions through entities, Fynbos, Ekwert, or Fynbos, another Fynbos, two Fynbos entities. You do a tabulation of all of those monies, 100 and something million given by Michel Leroux to predominantly the Democratic Alliance. Then you look at the Oppenheimers. They were giving predominantly to Democratic Alliance. They did give a little bit to Rise Mzansi, to I think even Build One South Africa at some point. But Nicky Oppenheimer makes interesting contributions in the tail end of the election, where he makes contributions to IFP in particular. I think at some point he gives 20 million in April and another 20 million in May. What this suggests to me is that there was polling indicating to them internally that MK was going to blow out KwaZulu-Natal and potentially get over the 50%. So if you're seeing those numbers, then you're going to put a stimulus package to the IFP to make sure that you can at least give some kind of a fight back opportunity to the IFP. What ends up happening is that the IFP claws back enough that they can then make a coalition with DA, with ANC to stop MK from taking KwaZulu-Natal, which, if there's a moral argument to be made, I think that MK should have been allowed to govern KwaZulu-Natal. But that's the second point. Maybe we can have that conversation. But looking at the flow of money, it became ascertainable to me that it seems as if power brokers and elites are making strategic bets so that they can have, one, access to the decision makers. If you look at it, for example, NASPAS, they make a variety of contributions to the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, not to the other political parties. And that to me is like a little bit worrying, because you're a media house owning a company. You own News 24, Media 24. And this is one of the publications post the election, which then started saying, no, the markets prefer the ANC and DA coalition, which to me, I was like, these markets, these people don't get along. They don't like each other. What is the rationality of this? But, you know, when you read the book Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman, you begin to understand how the dominant mainstream media cultivates attitudes, perceptions, and reactions. So when I look at how the donors played a role in bringing these two entities together, by the way, the other thing that is interesting here is the amount of money the Democratic Alliance got. I think in total, they had about 300 million in the last 3 years that they got towards the local government elections, as well as the national elections. Think about that. They're competing with that amount of money being donated, mostly from the Oppenheimers, also from Michel Leroux. Doesn't that give them some kind of a competitive advantage against the other political parties which are not able to access those resources? Doesn't that put a finger on the scale of democracy when donors can then look and say, oh, this guy is unpopular. People are worried about the black exodus from this particular party. People are worried about ABC. If I give them an additional 100 million or I give them another 50 million, doesn't that change the trajectory of the party's performance? Because they're able to put out all those radio ads that they were able to put out and a variety of other things, posters, etc. So when I look at the donors, it seems to me that there was a push of money to influence the outcome of the election. Then when I look at the media, post the results being announced, there it seems as if there was a definite push.
And there's an intersection between the two, right?
And because it's the same people who own and are donating to these entities, not to mention the fact that some of the rich billionaires also own polling companies where they can publish polling to say this particular entity is more popular, this particular entity is less popular. And polling in general is something that is getting scrutinized more closely because it's being used as a tool of soft persuasion, because some people look at the poll and then they go with it, not thinking about are all of the metrics of this poll scientific. So when the poll outcome then manifests, it's almost as if the polling guys can come and say, yeah, we were correct. But the question then arises, were you really, or did you participate in soft persuasion to produce this particular outcome? So before we even talk about the successes or failures of the GNU, I think it's important to lay bare or make plain that we also need to think going forward about these other entities and their role in democracy. Because if you have the media manipulating or curating or using its tools of broadcasting to usher in a particular governing coalition, doesn't that at some point become a perversion of democracy? Maybe not now. Maybe this is not the point where we start raising those concerns. But I think those concerns are legitimate to raise.
Yeah, and what do you make of the way the GNU has actually governed since it came together?
Yeah, so that's the second thing that I think is worth noting. At one level, I'm concerned about the lack of a strategic document. If you remember, when the president announced, when he gave the opening of Parliament address, he said, we are going to give you guys in a short period of time our strategic plan. Those are not the exact words that he gave, because there was this cabinet meeting that had happened the week before, a few days before.
Yeah.
And what we were told is that the cabinet would come up with this comprehensive strategic plan, which would be able to show their vision for South Africa, dealing with the deep structural problems. We are now in November, and we've seen that there's been no progress in doing that particular strategic planning document. And the default has then been that they are relying on the old strategic midterm documents that came from the ANC. So right now, as things stand, the government of national unity has no comprehensive vision strategic document that they can present for the administration. And that, to me, in and of itself, is something that is telling. It's not a red flag, but it's a yellow flag, I think, at the very least, because we need to know what is your real strategy, vision, and idea around unemployment. What is it around education? What is it around higher education? What is it around vocational education? We don't have anything. And from the reporting, it seems as if there's been moments of frustration, confrontation. We saw reports where they were saying the cabinet basically has been leaking information to mainstream media because of the differing opinions, and no one is seeing eye to eye on the key strategic thing that has to be resolved. So when you lack high level strategy, it begins to trickle down into the departments. So now, when you ask me about the performance of the GNU, I'm not seeing, one, urgency, and two, ambition. So in the first instance, let me use the Minister of Basic Education as an example. She says, I want to eradicate pit latrines. I think that's a noble aspiration. It's a worthwhile aspiration, but it's an unambitious aspiration. Why do I say so? You have a list of problems within the Department of Basic Education. One of them is sanitation. It affects dignity. It affects a lot, but it's not the only thing. The other thing is that 40% of the kids drop out before they get to grade 12. For me, that's number one. Then number two becomes the number of students who are writing STEM subjects. About 275,000 learners wrote maths out of 750,000. So it's about a quarter or a third are writing maths. From that third who wrote the maths, only 50,000 got a mark of 50% or higher. When you break down those metrics, how can you provide for the skills that the country needs when 50,000 students and about 52,000 are passing maths and physics? So the whole 52,000 is supposed to supply all 26 universities with enough students to do BSc, engineering, medicine. This is why we have a critical skills shortage.
Like the goal seems to be to stay still, and that's supposed to be some kind of achievement.
And for me, that's why I'm saying that there's no urgency. Because when you look at youth unemployment, right, quarter to quarter on the expanded definition, between 15 and 24, it's 70%. 3 out of 4 are unemployed.
It's a crisis.
Look at 25 to 35. It's 1 out of 2 are unemployed, right? Then you then consider, what are these young men doing in that time that they're unemployed, right? They're still going to be having relationships, making babies, and all of these other kinds of things. Some of them end up, taking substances. So many of the ills that we say we are identifying stem from the fact that you have a generation of people who either dropped out, didn't get high quality matric certificates, and are now sitting at home doing nothing. They say the idle mind is the devil's workshop. And I don't think that's necessarily 100% what I'm trying to imply here. But when you have so many people without economic opportunities, so many social ills are going to manifest. People are going to drink alcohol. They're going to take drugs. They're going to have unprotected sex. They're going to be in communities being unproductive. That's going to create a lot of the social ills. And many of them are going to then end up having to depend on the welfare system to sustain themselves, especially if they're in long-term unemployment. When I looked at the numbers of long-term unemployment, I think the number went up from 3.2 million in 2024 to about 6.4 million or thereabouts. People in long-term unemployment. So it's almost doubled, right? So if you are dealing with high crime rates, high unemployment rates, 40% dropout rates, right? To mention just a few.
Yeah.
You're not coming into this game with the luxury of taking your time, chilling, even though the rugby team is doing well, even though we've got some teams doing well here and there, I feel like the social issues are so significant that what we ought to have seen in the 100 days of the administration was movement at pace. We needed to see people with urgency. And if you look at some of the government departments, some of the ministers haven't even staffed their full ministerial office. So where's the urgency?
Yeah.
Where's the urgency? So when I'm asked that question about the performance of the cabinet, one, I don't see the urgency. Two, I don't see the ambition. I saw a video today. Kim Kardashian was talking to a Tesla robot. The Tesla robot didn't seem to really understand what she was saying, but it was out in the field, able to be operated. It's not where it needs to be for it to be iRobot or whatever. But if you look at the technological developments that have been happening in the world, you have robots in the wild.
People are building humanoid robots out here.
In the wild now. They're out.
Yeah.
These are not experiments from 20 years ago when we were just looking at primitive robot competitions. You look at what's happening with OpenAI.
Yeah.
You look at what's happening with Perplexity. All of these other AI-based systems. Yeah. Apple has a phone now, which even though it's not fully integrated, the phone now has artificial intelligence integrated into the phone. We are in the first year of this technology, but it's worrying to me when I look at, and let me just extend this beyond just South Africa. When I look at African politicians, I don't see any appreciation from them about the fast changing environment, which is not going to only affect manufacturing. It's going to affect knowledge production. It's going to affect a lot of sectors. They are acting as if it's 1999 or 2009 when it's 2024 and Elon Musk is launching robots that can re-enter the environment and be reused. The scientific advancements that we are seeing in the West do not warrant a lack of urgency in the African ecosystem. And have we seen any minister having real conversations about the scientific advancements, what we need to catch up? When I read books like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa or Guns, Germs and Steel, which are popular books that I reference when we're talking about underdevelopment in Africa, the key message, even if you want to add why nations fail, the key message is that technology is a factor in the underdevelopment of a society. So at all times, you must stay on top of the technology as a community, as a people. If there's new stuff coming in that is changing how stuff is made, produced, distributed, consumed, you have to be on top of that. Otherwise, those technological advancements will render your society obsolete and you won't be able to generate revenue, income, etc. When I look at the cabinet and I look at the discourse that we're having, and I look at the goals that are being expressed, I'm not seeing goals that are commensurate to the technological developments in the world and the needs. There's a lack of ambition. What made Kennedy a unique guy is that he came and said, we can go to the moon to the Americans. They were like, what? The moon? Why are we trying to? But it was about aiming high and setting a high bar. Elon is talking about going to Mars, right? They may or they may not be able to do that in his lifetime.
Sure.
The point that I'm making is when you're a leader or a group of leaders coming into a situation, you have to show that you believe in the capacity of the state, you believe in the capacity of the people, and you believe in the capacity of your team to turn things around to a winning combination. Soccer coaches are fired for lack of ambition. If you go coach Manchester United now and you say, you think 8th is a good place to end the season, you won't be there next week.
Well, I think that's where Man United will end. But that's besides the point,
But you get what I'm trying to say. So this is my view on the performance. But there's another thing that I want to discuss there, which is, I touched on it a little bit, but it's the HR element. every minister operates through a team. You cannot be everywhere. You are the decision maker, the delegator.
Sure.
If you think about the Ministry of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, he's had a lot of HR issues there, which worry me about the broader cabinet. And I'm using him as a case study.
Yeah, sure.
Because at the beginning, he hired a chief of staff. There were issues with the chief of staff. He said, I'm asking the chief of staff to leave. The chief of staff is still there.
Yeah.
And then he tried to also add 4 people who were unqualified for the job, didn't get the special accommodation that he was seeking. As things stand right now, I don't even know if he has a staff contingent outside of his chief of staff. Then the question then becomes, who's working in the ministry then? Right? From the executive side of things. Of course, you've got the bureaucracy that will work regardless of who comes in and who doesn't. But to provide strategic leadership, delegation, decision-making, the minister needs to have his full contingent in place.
Sure, and hit the
operating.
ground running, right?
So now you don't have advisors, you don't have your PA. Who's doing any of this stuff? And that to me also is something that I think we need to be paying more attention to. Because if we want to understand the efficiency of an administration, we can't just look at, did this minister go to every soccer game and rugby game and cricket game and give good speeches? Did he show up when there was a civil protest? Or did she say harsh things about miners that were underground?
Yeah.
We need to be linking them to their performance plans and everything else that is attached to the office.
Yeah, it's been a lot of PR and a lot of like vibes. But when I search for underlying fundamental shifts, underlying achievements, tangible achievements that will move the needle on unemployment, move the needle on poverty, move the needle on crime, I'm afraid to say, and it's early days and maybe we'll be proved wrong, I'm starting to get the sense that we're dealing with more of the same. And we've been here before, with the first Ramaphosa administration where huge hopes, everyone was ready. It felt like the nation was ready to go to a new moment, and it was just vibes.
Yeah, the menu didn't change. There was a lot of tumamina and then sesugu tumile. Where's the stuff? Nothing has changed.
Absolutely.
And now the markets, let's be honest, this is stability coalition. I think that's what I called it last time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a continuity stability coalition. We're not seeing anything different.
Yeah.
The markets actually don't want anything different. They want continuity. Because if you think about South Africa, unequal societies are weird. They're weird. Even in America, you go to America and you observe very quickly something. If you make, let's say, more than $5,000, $6,000 a month, America's a great place to be. You can have fun. You can go have, your Korean barbecue every weekend. You can go out. You can lease a car. Life is good if you are past a certain point.
Yeah.
But if you're under that 50,000 a year, if you're in that 3,000 or below per month income bracket, America's very hard because you're struggling to pay rent. You're struggling to keep the lights on. And this is a feature of inequality. The difference between America and South Africa is that their unemployment is relatively low at under 4%. Here, if you are in corporate South Africa, Springbok South Africa, South Africa is great, isn't it?
Life is good, right?
Because you've got a maid, you've got a gardener, you've got a car, you're sending your kid to a private school, you've got the cell phone contracts, you've got the medical aid, you can go on vacations, Cape Town wine route, you're flying Kalula and all of these other brands. Is it Kalula still thing? What is it now? SAA.
Yeah.
In any case, not SAA. What's the one that they like? Fly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Fly SAA. So if you look at people who are in deep within middle-class South Africa, it was the best of times, as Charles Dickens said.
Yeah.
But everyone else is going through the worst of times. Because you look at the cost of electricity.
Absolutely.
You look at those tariff increases. 100 Rand cannot buy you a lot of units.
And that's where electricity reaches in the first place.
Yes. So now when people are every day trying to just get enough electricity to get through, it's so difficult when people are trying to send messages to uncles and cousins and so on just to be able to get enough electricity to get through. Then you look at the food prices. The food inflation has gone up and has continued to go up. I bought a fudge. I bought a fudge from Spar. This fudge used to be 9 Rand. It's 18 Rand now.
Oh my.
Yeah, I wanted to have it before the show, for energy. And I was just thinking to myself, that's 100%.
Sure.
On this fudge.
What the fudge?
What the fudge, indeed, right? But it's indicative of the challenges that the country is facing.
Absolutely.
So we are still in that duality now where those who looked at MK and EFF and said, no, we can't have the barbarians. There are barbarians at the gate. We can't have a left-leaning coalition.
Sure.
They wanted stability.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want stability if you're a manager at one of the big companies? Why wouldn't you? You're living nice. It's a nice life, boy. You got 2 cars, everything is flowing. You just want to go to the concerts, but the real challenge is that that's not everyone's experience. And this is why that conversation about structural change is so important. Even your book crucial. Is so important. And it's something that we don't talk about enough because the politicians now have become slick. They'll say, we believe in an inclusive economy. And then they'll want to privatize the water and then privatize the electricity. How is that inclusive? That's extractive. They'll say, no, we believe in an inclusive economy, which is why we are now allowing this guy to merge with that other guy. So you're like, no. But that's going to concentrate the stuff further. Every politician who speaks about macroeconomics, including the Minister of Finance, will come there and say, no, we're concerned about the concentration of wealth in a few hands and that there's lack of competition, which is why we're going to allow private-public partnerships, which allow these companies to come bruh.
Cutting budgets to key social services as well.
Your whole first half of the speech is not in line with the interventions that you're suggesting.
Yeah.
And this GNU, unfortunately, is a continuity GNU and a stability GNU, but that only benefits middle-class South Africa, and not only middle-class South Africa, upper middle-class South Africa.
And look, if this government is not careful, the sheer scale of the crises that it confronts will overtake it. It's nice now, it's a honeymoon period, the media is on their side, and everyone's singing Kumbaya and whatever. But reality is it's already started to creep in, but it's going to creep in. And what this government must be careful of is if it doesn't start moving soon, then people are going to turn on it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be pretty when that happens, right? Because the worst thing you can do is raise people's hopes sky high and then not deliver anything on those hopes.
You're right. And I think we're going to see a phenomenon like what the Americans saw. One of the most interesting things observing the American election was the denialism of the economic conditions by the Democrats, because the Democrats would look at some top line economic indicators, say unemployment is at the lowest it's ever been, inflation is coming down, ABC, you should be happy with the economy is better than it's ever been. But people on the ground were like, do you know what my gas bill is like? Do you know what my lights bill is like? And I was listening to these people on Twitter and TikTok, and I was like, there's a disconnect between the street level American and the elite member of the Democratic establishment. And they keep thinking this messaging will resonate with the people, but the people are put off by the fact that you actually have the audacity to say that Bidenomics is benefiting them when it's not benefiting them, right? And then you have the audacity to come back and tell them that you helped them by 1, 2, or 3, 4, when they're not seeing a transformation in their lives. So the Democrats were so shocked that Donald Trump won. But the whole time, everybody else in the global community is like, this was not surprising. You guys got caught up in your own echo chamber. Because what happens when you have these big interests and lobby groups and people own media houses, they can ignore platforms like this and ignore voices that are actually raising the real issues. That's not to say that those issues are not resonating with people on the ground. So when you had MSNBC and CNN and all of these platforms, and you've got the podcast, Pod Save America, and all of these, what do they call them? I can't remember now what these guys call themselves. Top of my mind, another podcast that's popular on the left. These guys, and Ezra Klein, these guys, although he tried to warn them much earlier, these guys were just having an inside chat while the Titanic was sinking. And they were failing to appreciate that things have shifted. The ground has shifted. And I think this may be what happens with this GNU. Because if you look at the narratives coming from mainstream, right? You look at print media, you look at satellite TV media in particular, it's still all, no, everything is good.
It's working.
Listen to this minister. Listen to that minister. It's all good in the hood. But at the street level, you're already beginning to see the frustration, because people can appreciate when their lives are not changing. And sometimes when they are being played for political...
People know when they're being lied to as well. And unfortunately, the South African mainstream media landscape is one where, not all the time, there's great journalism that happens in that space, but sometimes there's just this narrative that takes hold that has to be pushed, and people are now wise enough to see through that. I think we saw it with Ramaphosa, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, people were like, "You can't keep selling us this."
Yeah,
right?
because
it's
it's not 2010 anymore.
Yeah,
Philip,
exactly.
it's here.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
no, we don't feel it anymore. Yeah.
And let's see. I think one of the biggest assets this government has is it's got a lot of media on its side. But I don't know how much longer that will last. We'll see.
Yeah, but I mean, even if the media is still on their side and still pushing narratives, the media has this MC Hammer, can't touch this, Phala Phala can't touch this, like it's stories like that. And even now, there's some reporting about people who bought houses in South Africa from Frelimo, and there's a big corruption scandal that was revealed by open secret, same as the MTN corruption scandal, which people should go look at. And media locally doesn't touch it with the same energy. But even if they do that, at a certain point, it's not going to necessarily work.
Yeah.
You can't.
Absolutely.
You can't fabricate over people's lived experiences. But I think I know what the hope is. The hope is that EFF implodes and that Jacob Zuma doesn't make it. That's the hope.
Yeah.
So then if that happens, then you just fund the ANC and you fund the DA, and then you remix the GNU again. Maybe with Fikile Mbalula, maybe with Panyaza, but they're happy to play the game. So I think that's what people are hoping within the elites circles, that look, actually we can drag this out 5 more years.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. You mentioned Phala Phala, and there's that Concourt case coming soon. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, because what we've got here is the EFF approaching the Constitutional Court to effectively say, your decision not to consider Justice Ngobo's report was irrational. You had to take serious consideration of it, and you can't just rubber stamp ignoring the report. That is counter to the very idea of scrutiny and oversight that is supposed to be inherent in Parliament. It's a fascinating case. I can't believe that no one is talking about
this
it.
This is the thing. What you just pointed out is today is what? Today, at the time we're recording this, the 19th. I don't know when this is coming out, but the case is on the 26th.
26th, yeah.
You would have anticipated in a robust and fair media environment that these arguments would have been ventilated properly. Absolutely. And that the public would be brought into knowledge about everything that's going to happen on the 26th, 1 week away. Yeah. It affects the president of the country. Absolutely. The media coverage has been very lethargic. It has been lackluster, and it has been, I think there's been a paucity. Absolutely. That's an English word for you guys, paucity. Little or nothing coverage in respect to the story. That's worrying. And these are the type of things that over time corrode the media's credibility, because there are these stories that should not be touched, or touched with the right level of attention. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the arguments that have been made. And I'm still going to go over all of the heads of arguments and all of that. And perhaps it just needs its own separate discussion, because it's quite a lot. But the arguments that are being made by Advocate Camille Premid on behalf of the EFF are interesting, because they've already been given some credence in the Hlophe case in the Western Cape. Because remember what happened there. The NGOs and the DA went and said, Parliament has to apply its mind. It has to be rational, and it cannot just use the fact that they are Parliament to rubber stamp something or operate with. And the court agreed with them to a degree, right? Said you have a case here, right? And the arguments that were made is that you actually have to make a rational decision when you operate as Parliament.
Absolutely.
So the decision to not go to the next stage, which would be the impeachment ad hoc committee, is a decision of Parliament.
Absolutely.
Then now the question is, even though you voted and you won the vote, was the decision rational? Was the decision reasonable? Was the decision in line with your constitutional obligations as members of Parliament?
Absolutely.
Now, when you think about that and you reflect on how the decision happened, I was very frustrated that day when I was watching that voting process. And I must say,
extremely frustrating day.
I must commend Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, because she was one of the few people who said, Andizi. Andizi to this thing. History is going to show me maybe to have been on the right side of this particular vote, right? Because the concerns that were raised by the retired Chief Justice, Sandile Ngcobo, and the panel, it was a panel of a judge and an attorney and him. These are not small time lawyers.
Justice Ngcobo himself, that's a serious
man.
That's a serious jurist.
That's a serious jurist. I think he's even been lecturing at Harvard or something like that. So when he comes and says something is hitting the water, konokshaya manzi here. We can't just say, no, there's an error of law, because that's the first reporting I saw. There's an error of law. I went and I read the thing and I said, hang on, he's not wrong about the things that he's raising, because there are a bunch of laws which stipulate that if you get foreign currency, you can't actually transact in foreign currency. You can't keep it. You have to do this. Money has to be declared.
If certain amounts get stolen, you have to report it. If you don't report it...
He laid it out. He laid out why he didn't believe Hazim Mustafa's version. And by the way, history has shown that some of that stuff has been fair. Because Hazim Mustafa said to Sky News that, here are my documents, I declared the money. The DA sent a request to SARS. SARS says, we can't find any declarations by this chap. All of a sudden, he can't be found by anybody. He couldn't be found by the South African Reserve Bank. When they looked into the matter, they said, we can't reach this guy. This guy was on Sky News. All of a sudden, he's on no news. So he was willing to talk, but he wouldn't even show the Sky News journalist those papers direct. He wouldn't let her take photos of them, if you recall that interview. So when the Section 89 independent panel report says, this Hazim Mustafa's version is not adding up, that warrants further scrutiny. It does warrant further scrutiny. Now, what did the ANC parliamentary benches say at the time? And Fikile Mbalula was one of the vocal people there. They said, no, this thing has got problems in law. The president wants to take it to the courts.
And review
to
it
be tested
in the Concourt,
and reviewed.
Sure.
What then happens later? The case is withdrawn.
Bait and switch.
It's withdrawn. He withdrew it and said, I reserve the right to continue with this. The Concourt said they were not going to hear it on an urgent basis or anything like that. They said, listen, go to High Court first. That's where you need to. You can't just come to the Concourt, start here. This is not how this thing works. Go to the High Court. He withdrew the case. Right? So now the argument that was used in part by members of the ANC to lobby for why this thing was not the right time to do has now been proven to be not a credible argument. It's almost as if they misled Parliament, if at all that was a genuine argument. And other arguments that were raised as well at the time. This is what Advocate Camille Premed and others are going to be trying to argue, to say this decision was not made on a rational basis. There are sufficient questions that are raised by the Section 89 independent panel report that require Parliament to start an impeachment process, to get to the bottom of it. We must remember that he can still win an impeachment process.
Of course, it's just about...
Let's actually understand. How much money did you have? How much was in the sofa or whatever? And there's a lot that needs to be explained there.
And even outside of criminal liability, or even some kind of civil liability, right? Just in terms of ethical conduct from a president. Like, why was all this money in your couch while you were the president, etc.? Why didn't you report the theft, etc.? These are questions that the nation needs an answer to, whether or not There's actually a criminal case to answer.
Yeah, and you know what? To be fair to the president, maybe he's old school and he doesn't want to admit it. He likes cash. He likes to have cash around. It makes him feel like the man. Some people are like that. You know, as a kid, I used to love having coins in my pocket. I'd be walking around jingling coins because I felt like I have money. Some people like to see money. They like to have cash. I'm giving him benefit of the doubt. They could be.
Where does the couch come in?
Man, you got cash, you got to put it somewhere. Right? All I'm saying is that some old school people believed in that. Like there was the case in America. Is it Fannie Willis or something like that? They said she had a large amount of cash that she then paid for the flights for her and her boyfriend. It became part of the litigation during the Trump saga.
Right.
And what she explained is that, you know, she was raised by a dad who just told her to always keep cash on her.
Sure.
And that's why she had the cash to make the payments.
Yeah.
That's what she said, right? And people were like, yeah, it makes sense. Old school, you know, parents believed in that. And Mr. Ramaphosa is 73. So maybe he's from that era where you were always told, keep some cash on you. All I'm saying is that there could be justifiable reasons for all of this. Justifiable explanations. But the refusal to go through the process.
Absolutely. But get this, because there's another bait and switch that's happened that we haven't even realized. I have to hand it to President Ramaphosa because he goes before Parliament effectively. And says, or the ANC says, no, vote against this report because we're going to review it. The review gets withdrawn, but the vote stands.
Yes.
But then remember that President Ramaphosa said, actually, once all the organs of state and institutions have investigated, I will then speak. I don't want to influence them.
Yes.
The Hawks have investigated. The NPA says they're not charging.
Exactly.
Public Protector
says there was no transaction.
SARS has come back. So everyone's investigated. But now...
Come clean. Go to JJ or something. Come here to SMWX. Sit in this chair. It's a nice chair. It's a presidential chair. You can come up in here.
I think the president should come on SMWX, honestly. But anyway, they'll never understand.
Oh, you never know.
The chair is open.
The chair is going to be here after my bum leaves it.
Absolutely. And so now he's quiet. Everyone has investigated. And the plan was always to kick the can down the road, let people forget about this, and never to give a full public account of what happened there. And that seems to be where we are right now.
Yeah, this actually, it reminds, one of the things I've always wanted to do is to look at forgotten scandals. Because it seems as if this is a playbook that has been played a few times. There's a prominent minister now who at some point was accused of 100 million going missing that they took from a union with his wife, and that story went away. It was reported on in Mail and Guardian all over the place. So it seems as if there is a playbook that, if you're powerful enough, you can circumvent the system for long enough till you're out of office. And even the way that we are now doing this SIU process, the SIU just does civil processes. So they freeze money, some money is recouped, but that doesn't lead to any real consequences for anybody. But going back to the Phala Phala matter in particular, I do think that it's important for that issue to be resolved one way or another. I think that it reminds me of the fire pool. Because
Absolutely.
Listening to Minister Ronald Lamola, listening to Fikile Mbalula and a bunch of other people when they were arguing in Parliament that day, I could not shake that it was another fire pool moment.
So true. But lest we forget, the whole reason we had this independent panel was because of what Parliament did with Jacob Zuma, right?
The very thing Zondo said in the report is that Parliament failed to hold Jacob Zuma to account.
And so in order to hold the president to account, you had to have a certain independent preliminary step, because we know parliamentarians are going to do wild things. And then this impeachment process was developed following a judgment.
Which is not a foregone conclusion, because you can get exonerated by the process and say, no, there's nothing to see here.
So it's a curious story, because the ANC gets told by the Concourt, you have to create this independent panel. They create the panel tells them something they don't like, and then they're like, no, we'll just ignore that too anyway. It's like you have learned nothing about this presidential accountability thing.
And also just about trying to preserve the ethics of the seat of power. because you said this dude violated the ethical standards.
Absolutely.
Now you are creating another way of circumventing the same ethical standards that you say you want to uphold. The danger, and Eusebius Makeza once said this, and I think it was about Pius Langa, and people wanted his term to be extended and all of that. And what he said is like, it's not about the good guy.
Yeah.
You don't make the rules for the good guy.
Absolutely.
The good guy is going to be good.
Yeah.
It's the bad guy you need to be worried about.
So true.
Because after your good guy leaves, another guy comes in.
Yeah.
And if you make it such that he cannot be removed, or he can circumvent, or you set precedents that help him. So those who say, no, Julius Malema is a dictator, are you going to want this to be the system if Julius Malema is the president? Right?
His party can just shut down any inquiry.
Exactly. Or if Zuma comes back, or let's say Tutu Zuma becomes president, are you going to want this? Because people's morality gets clear when you say someone's name that they don't like. All of a sudden, they're like, ooh.
Absolutely.
Do you guys want Julius Malema to have cash in his sofa and then for Parliament to be able to block this?
Yeah.
Because if you don't want it for Julius Malema, why do you want it for someone else?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the principle has to stand on its own feet and the principle has to be neutral.
Yeah.
Very often people are unwilling to acknowledge the principle when it affects their favorite. But in so doing, you corrode the integrity of the very institution that you say you believe in. If we believe in democracy, if we believe in constitutionalism, if we believe in every word that was written in this most progressive constitution in the world, then you can't dilute parts of it that say that there should be no conflict of interest between a president's role as the president and his personal life. And you can't be glib and do what the public protector did, where she ignored, case law that exists about this issue. And by the way, the standard is not even just that there must be conflict of interest. Even the appearance of a conflict of interest, the risk of a conflict of interest actually is the standard.
That's what the court found when it was Zuma in the hot seat. Right?
Yeah.
And, not to belabor this point, but since no one else is talking about it, and it's actually a crucial issue that involves and invokes the president, parliament, and the judiciary all at once, I think there is also a question about the courts. And of course, as soon as you say that, you have to hasten to add that, the judiciary is, of course...
Judges matter, Baba.
Exactly.
Judges, you matter. You guys.
Sure. And the judiciary is, of course, unimpeachable and, or excuse the pun, and all of that, right? And we have an excellent and an independent judiciary, and we should cherish that fact. But I get the sense that, let's be honest, when cases go before the Concourt, they are in some ways inherently complex, or at least some of the issues are inherently complex. You could go one way or you could go another way. And I get the sense with Ramaphosa that in the Zuma era, courts were prepared to go one way, which was the accountability way. And I actually welcome that, because I think if you're faced with a 50-50 and there's an extremely powerful person, err on the side of accountability rather than impunity, right? But I get the sense that Cyril Ramaphosa has to do something in the open with 6 cameras on him before a court can hold him accountable. The bank statements thing, the court erred on one side of a complex issue. The speech that he gave before the election, on the SABC. Yeah,
I had issues with that speech. I thought it was...
absolutely.
I think the DA was justified to take that to the courts, and I would have ruled in their favor.
And I'm like, what does Cyril Ramaphosa have to do to get a court to rule against him, right? And again, I'm not saying that judges are biased in favor of Cyril Ramaphosa and there's some evil conspiracy, but what I'm saying is that because Ramaphosa is seen as a good guy, judges are more prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt than they are other politicians. And that has adverse consequences, not just for right now, but it may give presidents in the future an exceedingly long leash because of the leash that Ramaphosa has been given. And when it was Zuma, and again, I say this is good, the courts were like these super accountability agencies. And then they lost all their teeth when Ramaphosa came to office.
Look, I wouldn't disagree with anything that you've said. And I think what is happening now and that the judiciary needs to be aware of is that there is a credibility test that they are going through. And they may feel that they're above reproach and scrutiny, but people are observing these things. And for me, I became a little bit more circumspect with the dissenting decision in the Zuma 2021 case, Jafta J. I read the dissenting judgment and I said, I'm with these guys, actually. I'm with them. I think that you can't send this guy to prison direct. They needed to put a coercive order for him to appear.
Yeah.
But to simply deprive someone of a lot of constitutional rights, even if you feel he has disrespected the court, etc., and to send him to jail, I didn't support that.
Yeah.
I agreed with Mandisa Maya. I agreed with not Maya. It was
Theron.
Theron and Jafta J. I agreed with them, and I found that the court lost a lot of credibility when they did that unprecedented thing. And when I read the judgment, I reread it, they would say, no, yeah, we know we are paddling up the river without a, what was it? We're going up the creek without a paddle. That's what they said. I'm like, why would you want to do that on such a delicate issue? Saying, no, we know parts of this are unprecedented, but we're going to rely on our authority as the court, as opposed to relying on precedent.
Yeah.
I thought, you guys, then I started just the whole time re-looking my almost adoration of the court and the judges as beyond scrutiny and reproach. But why I'm saying that there's a moment that they need to be aware of and delicately aware of, because once the judiciary loses credibility, it unravels a legal system. It's like a currency. You know, a currency can be stable for a very long time. But if the currency becomes worthless, you then begin to see how important the credibility of the currency was. Even though the credibility of a currency was not something that you could put on a scale and say, no, this currency is a good currency. So now, looking at the American system, and I want to use it just as to indicate a point I'm going to make now. People have become circumspect because of the way the Supreme Court has been ruling in American judgments.
Sure.
They then started saying, hey, Trump put these guys in. And now they're ruling in particular ways that they're saying a president has so many powers, so many powers that he can even order, potentially and hypothetically, the killing of a political rival. And if it was done in the furtherance of presidential duties, he is immune from prosecution. That's what the Supreme Court said. And many people were like, what? This is preposterous. These judges are now ruling on the basis of ideology and on the basis of partisanship. And I was like, it's so clear to people now that that's what's happening in America. There are conversations about should, the Supreme Court have different ways of being appointed, etc. Because people can now see that judges can be ideological, can be political players, and can even be egotistical in and of itself. Then in the African space, it's always been known in corrupt African regimes that judges will do whatever the dictator wants and they'll rule in accordance with that dictator, whether it's Museveni, whether it's Mugabe. It's been known. Very rare to get rulings that went against Mugabe when he was alive, because that, Mugabe would make you an offer you couldn't refuse and you would rule in his favor. Now, it seems as if there's a myopia around the South African context from the people, the scholars and the academics who speak about the South African context. So you can identify that judges in Uganda may rule in favor of Museveni in ways that are not favorable to queer people in Uganda. You can identify that judges can rule in favor of Robert Mugabe in ways that are not pro-democratic or pro-human rights. You can even identify that there are issues with the presidential appointment of Supreme Court judges in one of the oldest democracies in the world, the United States of America. It's Vision 2020 for those things. But you can't identify with the same level of honesty and integrity the same challenges existing within the South African system. And when you don't do that, you assume that other people have the same either myopia or refusal. What is it? Head in the sand type of approach to these issues. Other people are looking at everything and thinking to themselves, and this is why the people who are saying that we must, abolish the constitution, or who are very critical of judges, are finding resonance on the streets. This is why now you have to have NGOs which are making counter arguments saying, no, judges matter. The judges are not always paying attention to the fact that the public is getting more reticent to just accept the judgments at face value as being made in good faith, argued in good faith, and as per the prescripts of the law.
Absolutely.
And now they're beginning to think, are you guys also playing the game? Because on the one end, for instance, you see Vodacom going left, up and down, trying to refuse to pay this guy.
No one calls that Stalingrad, by the way.
No one calls it Stalingrad. No one says that they're undermining the judiciary. But when other people do it, it's like, no, it's Stalingrad. It's all of these things. Then people are like, but aren't these the same courts? Aren't these the same judges that matter? So they matter when it's Zuma who didn't go to the Zondo Commission. But when Vodacom doesn't pay Makate, did we swap the judges or what? So I think there is a big issue that it's an undercurrent.
Yeah.
But undercurrents can suck you down and drown you. But it's an undercurrent. So at face value, we're having these conversations by the institutions that speak on behalf of the judges. Judges matter. Judges are beyond reproach, etc. But the undercurrent is saying, but why did they seal the CR17 documents? Why was Zuma arrested? Why did they actually say that, this contempt of court can prevent him from becoming a member of parliament? Even though they've lost these judgments and they're now law and we respect them, there are people whose arms are beginning to fold when it comes to conversations about the judiciary and become more skeptical. And that is corroding the credibility of the institution. If I look at the way people speak about judges now versus how we were taught about judges in law school, there's been a shift.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's important to have this debate. And, it's important not to foreclose this kind of debate. I think those who have the debate in bad faith, and say that, judges are all doing this, or they're all funded by that, or whatever, that undermines the whole debate, because now it's descended into conspiracy and what have you, right? But I think that there just really is a question for me about, like, who gets the benefit of the doubt before court and who doesn't, and what is at play when one powerful politician gets the benefit of the doubt on successive occasions, and one, can never catch a break. Because I'm not saying like Zuma should never have been held accountable by the courts, right? I tend to agree with you on the Concourt judgment. They call it Zuma 1 or Zuma 2.
Yeah.
But the one where he was sent to jail in civil proceedings, even though it was like contempt is a hybrid thing, whatever, we can put that to the side. Yeah, that didn't sit easy with me. But all the other things, Nkandla, secret ballot, impeachment, I can get on board with that. I think that's crucial.
Yeah, I supported those judgments. Yeah,
absolutely. Accountability. That in some ways, that's when the court was at its best, right? You had a powerful executive, a powerful president who had a lot of popular support, and the court said no, right? But then keep that same energy for every president. I'm like, Ramaphosa suspends the public protector soon after she sends him those questions, right? Western Cape High Court says the timing there just is, you had a lot of...
And the timing is
right?
It's dubious timing.
And Concourt finds a way, I'm not saying it's a simple legal question, but those on the other side of the debate also must accept that it's not an obvious legal question on the side. Any reasonable person could be like, whoa, that's a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And Concourt just basically completely ignores it, right? Or they don't ignore it, but they rule completely in favor of Ramaphosa, right? And so you're kind of like, but I thought we were like accountability.
And that's a good example, right? Because now you're saying that this big issue that has been brought to the public protector, right, is such that the president can then use his powers to shift the jury or shift the adjudicator in a way that favors him. And up to now, I think they still just, and then later on, she then comes and then makes these arguments, which were a stretch, right?
Yeah.
To say, no, he's not selling the buffalo. It's not him selling per se. If you squint 60 degrees and then you take a deep breath and then you take your COVID vaccine, you will realize what I'm like, what? That's not, I'm just I'm being facetious, but you get what I'm trying to say is that when that then becomes the outcome, and I think what they did in the media was to villainize all of the people in those processes, because then they say, no, John Hlophe is a Zuma guy. So that's why the Western, now we're not talking about the actual merits of what the Western Cape Court judgment said. We're saying, no, but that was Hlophe, eh? And then like, no, that was Advocate Busiwe Mkhwebane. And Mkhwebane, you know her, hey? She's got problems, hey? She came in there and switched on ANN7, hey? And you know, she's Zuma. And the other actors are all viewed as neutral, benevolent. We can't have that. We can't have one side we play the man and the other side we play the ball. When we're looking at high stakes games of power here. And I think right now, as things stand, the Office of the Public Protector has lost some gravitas because it seems as if in a critical moment, instead of allowing, she could have made a finding against President Ramaphosa. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would have been like Nkandla, because if you remember, the Nkandla finding was that, hey, you need to pay back the money. And then Zuma said, no, that's a recommendation. A recommendation is a recommendation. And that's what I think made the scandal actually accelerate and go further, because now they're like, no, but if you squint also, this is a pool for fire. This is thatch. Thatch in Nkandla is far from, the fire station. So we need something. People can swim in here because it's still water, but really what it's for. And we did put what is that product that they put in the pool called Blue 500 or whatever? We did put this in here, but come on, guys, it's about the thatch. So, I mean, all of that is what made the Nkandla issue, I think, for me, cross a certain line. So even if she does say, look, I do find that this was a conflict, and I do find that the president needs to take corrective steps, and then he comes and says, okay, I did this thing, I admit this thing was not appropriate, and I have taken these particular remedial steps to deal with this, to respect the office. Why couldn't that have been an option?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder I know the ATM is reviewing that public protector report as well, so it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Yeah, look, it's I don't even know. You want to be very careful and circumspect when you have these conversations, because again, you don't want them.
You want to feed conspiracy.
Yeah. But the Constitutional Court is is a really important institution. It's the one institution that has probably held up best in the last 30 years. I just don't think when it comes to President Ramaphosa that they have the same zeal for accountability that they do for other powerful people. And I'm afraid to say, I may be proven wrong, but I don't know if they're gonna.
I'm curious to see what happens with this particular case, because
just give it the seriousness it deserves. Don't come with these loopholes, and that's all I'm asking.
I want to see what they do here.
Yeah,
I want to see how they navigate this, because they're going to have to do a lot here around rationality and reasonableness if they're going to say that what was done was rational.
And they're going to have to explain to us, if they want to find for the president, that it was okay to breach separation of powers and tell Parliament what to do when it was Zuma. But all of a sudden, when it's Ramaphosa, then Parliament can just vote against a very obviously adverse report, right? And why is it okay and rational in one circumstance and not in the other?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that I'm going to be curious to see. Obviously, this hasn't happened. We're going to have to see how it's argued.
Sure.
I've got the heads of argument. I'm going to read them. I'm going to take time. I want to really be 100% sharp on this. Read all of the other judgments in the last 5 years or so, just so that I'm on the money here in terms of I want to follow everything with the level of attention of a master's student following. I want to follow every granular detail.
PhD, bro, not master.
Yeah, PhD even. Okay, let's go. Yeah, so I wanna do that. I wanna follow it at that level because, like you said, there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah.
That is not about President Ramaphosa. It's not about
Absolutely.
Phala Phala. It's not even about the decision. It's about the integrity of
Absolutely.
the institution.
And I also just want to be clear about this because I've obviously been on the receiving end of this myself. I'm not casting aspersions over the judges, nor am I casting aspersions over the advocates.
I understand,
who are representing President Ramaphosa or the ANC. They're at liberty to do that, and they should mount the best possible case they can. I'm interested in the import of this case outside of those who are vested in arguing for either side, right?
Yeah.
Which is their duty to do. So don't bash the advocates and don't do all of the stuff.
And sometimes people do that too much. You know, I'm going to say this and people will you'll deal. Because like even with Advocate Mpofu, right? I don't know if you know the guy, but people frequently will make it about him. I'm like, the guy is at work.
Yeah.
You know, like if I'm a doctor and I get a cancer patient or I get a heart transplant or whatever the case may be, my prospects of success are not just determined by the fact that I went to medical school for this stuff. The things that come with the patient are going to determine whether or not I have prospects of success. And we need to return to that habit where we looked at the work that was done by Advocate Barry Rue. And he was defending a vile character, a vile man. And we were able to say, Advocate Barry Rue is good at law. This is a losing case. Herenel is going to win. Advocate Herenel is going to win. But yeah, good job by this guy. I like the way he's tried to make an effort for his client without saying, Advocate Barry Rue, he supports murderers. Huh? He's a sexist misogynist. No. How? He's at work. But we don't always do that with everybody else, particularly in the political cases. And that has always been a frustration to me.
Tell me, don't even get me started, bro.
But anyway, we made the point. I think you're clear. Your position is clear.
Says it. Bro, did you watch the Floyd interview? And,
I watched the Floyd interview.
What were your thoughts, your honest thoughts? And what are your thoughts about the situation?
Man. I did make a video on my thoughts.
Yeah, but you make 6 videos a day, so I mean,
so
subscribe. By the way, to the dissection.
Yeah. Shout out to the dissection. Thanks.
Make sure you subscribe to Jamie's channel.
Yes, thank you. So, for me with Floyd, the thing that I've always I treat Floyd differently than the other political actors because he is somebody who says, don't talk to me about personalities. Don't talk to me about this. Talk to me about ideology. Talk to me about, Marxist, Leninist, anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist. Fair and fine. So when I listened to the first statement when they announced with Julius, then I said, no, I'll explain later. I can't explain now on the platform. I said, I'm curious to hear from the Marxist, Leninist, anti-capitalist, anti-neo-capitalist, Pan-African perspective, Fanonian, you name it. I want to hear his ideological reasoning, his academic reasoning. I need to see footnotes. I need an explanation here which matches how he has positioned himself in society. So I watched your interview with him and I thought, no, man. I don't think he's actually done that, even here. I felt that he left a lot of questions unanswered, particularly when he is talking about, I wrote these documents, or I'm the one who curated and, edited them, cardinal pillars, you name it. Then I'm like, okay, so if this is your brain trust, so to speak, if you are the curator, the marks of this particular thing, why is any other vehicle a better vehicle for you at this particular juncture? If you are talking ideologically, right? So I didn't think his ideological explanation was good. Then I thought that he's a very good speaker, right? And he's not new to the political game. But I found that he was doing a lot of sneak dissing in the interview, because then he's like, no, you can't be loyal to people, or that will lead to gangsterism. Or I was like, wait, what are you saying?
That moment was so interesting to me, because if people go and watch it back, what I was actually saying was, tell us about the brotherhood you have, even though you've decided to leave, right? And he was like, he said the thing that I expected the least, where he was like, no, there's no brotherhood.
What brotherhood?
And I was like,
we're not in this
wow.
thing for brotherhood.
Yeah. And people in the EFF subsequently thought that like I was teeing him up to say that. I was genuinely interested in like, personally, clearly you have a brotherhood.
Yes.
Where are we there? And when he was like, there's no brotherhood, I can assure you in the studio, we were all like,
look,
wow.
and I think
Okay.
people expect, they have unrealistic expectations of a platform like this. You can't do certain types of pushback. You can't then, this is not Charlemagne the God, you know what I mean? And people don't like to go to Charlemagne, right? Because he sometimes goes beyond and like berates people. Absolutely. And will ask Tyler, Absolutely. Hey, you said you don't want to, why are you not black? Why are you saying you're colored, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And at a certain point, maybe you'll be able to do that kind of stuff. Maybe 2 million subscribers, then you'll have the independence to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
But you still have to have the diplomacy for people to want to come back. And
people have to come here first. Like they'll go to the SABC because it's the SABC, right?
Yes.
But why would you come to my YouTube channel for me to grill
it's still
you?
YouTube, exactly.
Right?
So here, a lot has to be left between the lines for the listener and the viewer to discern and ascertain. Yeah. So I didn't take it as you trying to platform him. Even this whole thing where people are coming here and announcing that they're MK, what do you have to do with that, right? It's a platform that is being viewed by a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's effective for the MK to play that game.
Absolutely.
I don't view that as you being part of a MK cabal.
Yeah.
If they're playing the game, other political entities are able to do the same thing.
What they have shown is that clearly this platform has reach and it works. Like if someone from the DA wants to come on here to break news, believe me, I'll be the first to
You had
welcome
Brink on here. He came here when he was fighting to be the mayor and fighting to stay in.
Exactly.
Because he saw that this is I think...
And shout out to him for that. He's one of the few DA leaders recently who's come on the platform. And I encourage more to come on.
Yeah, they should. Look, the reality is that when it comes... There are 2 podcasts. I'm going to name names, not out of disrespect.
No, for sure.
You've got Mac G. Mac G is at the top, right? Mac G and Saul Pundiga are at the top. And Saul tries a lot of times to bring a little bit of substantive commentary and analysis.
He's very knowledgeable about current affairs.
And to debate the politicians when they go on.
Absolutely.
Mac G also sometimes will ask robust questions. Shout out to him for doing that interview with Errol Musk, etc., etc.
Brilliant piece of content.
But Mac G will also say, you smashing, bruh. You smashing, bruh.
I think you be like, even asked Errol Musk that or something.
So what I'm trying to put across is that in as much as they are doing good work, there's a certain lack of gravitas.
I wouldn't call it lack of I would say they're doing something in a different space. They're not trying to be like us.
Fair.
Or like me. And I'm not trying to be like them.
Fair,
they're way bigger, right? They're doing a
but
different
what I'm trying to say is that, look, man, it's more about the person, the person behind the politician,
sure.
Not necessarily let's talk about, you said this in the budget and then this happened. And
exactly.
So this is why and maybe gravitas is too hard a word, but I think that when it then comes to politics, economics, your podcast is number one. Right, they're these boys who talk to the slay queens and the baddies. Right, I've seen some of their content. Like lots of baddies will come and explain why their fatherless upbringing led them to the decisions that they're making. One even, I think, mentioned that her father would take her to the mall, and I was just like, this is so bizarre. But those boys are in between you and Mac G in terms of like subscriptions and maybe even viewership. But that is just like. Pure pop content.
Yeah.
So Mac G has this hybrid Charlemagne the God Breakfast Club content, but it lacks a little bit of gravitas. Not so Mac G. Not saying that you don't have any. I'm just saying that did you smash element takes away from the.
Yeah.
It's not a podcast that is going to be watched maybe by political science students first and foremost. They'll watch it maybe when they're chilling. Anyway, it's a great platform.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Everyone in South Africa looks up to what Mac G and Saul have done.
I'm in awe of what they've achieved at that podcast.
Yeah, and now that we've bent the knee to podcast and chill, we can now talk about what happens on this platform.
Yeah.
The fact that this platform exists at the level that it does warrants politicians to come through here.
Yeah.
It does, because past podcast and chill, this is the number one premium platform. Absolutely. And you have a PhD from Oxford. Like, we mustn't, you guys forget this stuff. You know, the thing about being a human being, it's a weird thing. Even if Michael Jordan was sitting here, just because he's there, I may feel like me and Michael Jordan are the same guy. He's just another guy. He's got red eyes. You know, who is he? Right? But at the end of the day, Michael has got accomplishment well beyond mine. And people sometimes forget that you've got books here that you wrote. You've got a thesis that was evaluated at Oxford. So when I'm talking about gravitas, these are the things that I'm talking about. So this is a premier destination for politics. Yeah. I don't view the fact that some MK guys came here, made dramatic announcement that now your podcast is MK or whatever the case may be. Yeah. I think that it's an appreciation of the role of your podcast. That's why when Brink was in trouble and Action SA was coming for him, right? He was like, where can I go? And then he went to his YouTube and he was like, this is the platform that will get me the views. I need to get my side of the story out there. I am going to go to SABC. I am going to go to Newsroom. I am going to go to ENCA. But if I want to close the circle, I need to go to SMWX because that is where the people who are consuming news and political content go to as well. And I think he may even have wanted to go to MacG, who knows? But I don't view it as a bad thing that you're coming here. So now back to Floyd.
Yeah.
The other thing about the conversation that I found to be, I think, insufficient for me is this idea of the brotherhood, not the gangster stuff. Yeah. I was just like, you know, for me, loyalty does mean something. You know, sometimes on my platform, people will come and say, no, I like the way you did it. SMWX must. I'm like, what are you saying? I'm not going to be disloyal to SMWX when I have a relationship with SMWX. Sure. I may even agree with you, but I will never come out in the public and say that because I actually appreciate the opportunities I've gotten on SMWX, the conversations we've had. We did cool stuff. So I felt that the gangsterism stuff to me made me question the loyalty element. And I want leaders who are trustworthy. You know, and when I raised that issue, people say, no, you hate Floyd. I said, no, I don't know him. I've never met him outside of a few instances where, you know, maybe at the conventions or whatever, conferences, like in that kind of a space. I don't know the guy. We didn't sit down and have a fight about a slay queen or anything like that. I don't know him. But when I heard him say those things, that bothered me. I was like, but now you and then later on I heard him say that Lozi is his brother. That he's been best friends with him for the last 20 years. Yeah. All right, but you just said Julius was your brother. Yeah. Well, what kind of brother are you? Is this a Cain and Abel type of brotherhood or what?
You know what surprised me was that, and that only in that interview. And like you said, it's so easy to watch an interview and think like, oh, but I would have done this and I could have said that. You don't know what it's like to be sitting down with Floyd Shivambu and he's like breaking for the first time.
Yeah.
You're confused too. You're like, what did he just say? Like, and you're making sense of it as he's speaking, right? But what surprised me, and I only think I realized in that interview, was that there was personal animosity between the two. Because up to that point, now everyone acts like they knew that because they watched the interview, which told them that, right? But it was perfectly stage managed when they did a press conference together, right? Up to my interview, that's what we knew. We knew that they had done a press conference, everything was good.
We thought the brotherhood was still intact.
Brotherhood was still intact, right? So we all learned, and I learned in real time that no, there actually was some kind of fallout here. What remains unexplained is what the source of that fallout was, whether it was personal, political, or some combination of the two. But I was genuinely surprised by that because I thought the two were on good terms. And it felt to me like after that, like, oh, wow, it turns out, okay, there's actually some bad blood here.
I think that's fair. And I think it is clear that there is some stuff. Maybe they'll resolve it over time. You know, people, when you follow people, even parasocially, which is how we follow a lot of these politicians, you just think of people as combos, you know, like it's Floyd and Julius, you know, and so on and so forth. It's Beyonce and Jay-Z and stuff. And even if you don't know them, and even if there's a real and fair justification for a split, at some point it'll still like make you feel uncomfortable because as a human being, you're like, oh, but those two, they go together. Or because you've seen them go together for so long. So I think there is that element. And I think even within the EFF, there are people who feel betrayed. And you can see that in the discourse.
Definitely.
Because
it's personal.
on Twitter there, when you check the comments, it's been bubbling, and you can see the animosity. And even when this Lozi story comes up, you can now see that there's a defensiveness because of how everything played out with Floyd. But at a political level, I think that if you're Floyd, and this is where I understand the move. If you're Floyd and you're looking in the EFF, you are deputy. There's no space for up at this particular moment. Malema's still relatively secure as president and CIC. Then you think, okay, but I've got a lot of young guys who are hungry, who want to come up, who want to have this position, this positionality, or even to be at a more senior level, direct things. So I've got no space up. There's young blood coming for me from down there. Only other way is to go out. Was he going to have a space in academia? I don't think so, because Floyd had a lot of, spats over the years with vice chancellors, etc., etc. So I don't think that they would be very embracing of him to come on to VETS or whatever the case may be, right? Because EFF even would have confrontations with the vice chancellors, and some of the people viewed that as Floyd is doing it, right? So I think that there were bridges burnt in academia, which maybe he has opportunities internationally, but now, unless you go back to the ANC, which also may not be viable under President Ramaphosa, maybe at a later stage, that could have been an option, but not now, not here, because then DA and other coalition partners are going to say, we just spent all this time saying these guys are the barbarians at the gate, and now you took Floyd, who is the intellectual of the machine. It's not going to work. So that leaves him with MK. If you're on this, there's a debate about how progressive is progressive, but if you're on this progressive caucus side of the equation, if EFF doesn't play out for you at this particular stage, all you have is MK. But you have something valuable to offer MK, because people who come from big institutions don't know how to do a startup anymore. Somebody who comes from SABC cannot do what you're doing because they don't know how to get it going, right? Because if somebody from SABC gets fired tomorrow and they say, no, I'm going to start a YouTube like Mpofu-Walsh, Dr. Mpofu-Walsh, they're not going to be able to do it, because there are variables to starting something which are different. SABC, if you're one of the big names, or even JJ to a degree, right? You rock up, your producer sets up everything for you. You just get your makeup done, you take your notes, and you do your thing. To start an entity requires a totally different skill set. It requires teachability, humility, patience, things that people at the top don't always have. So the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at a lot of these Brian Molefe types around Jacob Zuma, they don't have the expertise to start a party from scratch. They've never started a party from scratch. They've been guys who were executives for a long time. They also don't have the youthfulness to be able to go back to day one fundamentals. But Floyd has had 10 years of experience in a startup. It's like getting Sam Altman, to come and work for Microsoft. He brings all of the startup entrepreneurship of open AI and AI in general to your enterprise. I mean, obviously they didn't bring him in like that, but they are working closely with open AI, right, as Microsoft, because of the fact that they recognize we're not going to be able to replicate what these kids did from scratch without this kid. So Floyd has a value to MK.
Absolutely.
Which is why even now when they put him as the SG, I said, this makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Because he has that institutional knowledge to be able to bring that to them. So strategically, the decision made sense.
And I think he's going to... I think he's going to tear it up there.
We'll have to see.
In the SG position.
Let me tell you something. When Alex Ferguson resigned or retired from Manchester United, I said, I'm giving them 3 seasons. Otherwise, I'm out. I'm going to become like an occasional fan because I need to see what they do. And as much as I've given all of this analysis around he was in the startup, he saw it from scratch, we're still going to have to see. I'm partly confused by all of these moves.
I think we all are. It's a confusing time. It's a confusing on the governing coalition side because no one's ever seen this before. It's confusing in the opposition because we're all like, whoa, EFF, that was a mainstay for 10 years, is very different. MK is new. It's an era of uncertainty.
What's confusing me is also the time that this is all happening in. This because everything is happening all of a sudden. So soon after the election. I actually thought if there were going to be any moves, these would happen closer to 2026 local government.
I think we just haven't even begun to see the true shifts. Like ANC hasn't started its shifts. Everything is just, people are waiting to see. DA, I think we're going to see shifts. So in many ways, I think this is just a taste of what's to come in South African politics in the next few years.
Drama. Realignment.
As we end, I mean, you've also joined MK, so I mean, just for the record, that was a joke, everyone.
It was a joke. It was a joke. No.
Just in case. And for those listening to this on the podcast, he was wearing an MK t-shirt at the beginning.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That was the big joke.
Yeah, that was the joke.
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. Let's end here. I mean, what do you think the EFF should do from here? Because on the one hand, they've got people writing them off, which I think is completely knee-jerk. The EFF is a serious political player. Julius Malema is a seriously brilliant politician. But on the other hand, this, I would think, when I look at EFF history, is one of the toughest periods they've faced. And maybe because they are bigger than they were at the beginning, this shakes them at a time. If you think back to that stadium rally, when was it? Like a year and a half ago?
It was last year, I think. The one in FNB.
Yeah. I mean, that was in some ways the peak of the EFF. MK wasn't around. People were like, wow, I think the EFF's going to go from 10 to like 15% in the election. A year can change a lot, and they're not at that peak. So it's a tough time, but maybe there's a bit too much early celebration from the EFF's enemies that it's curtains. What do you think they need to do, and how do you assess where the EFF is going into its National People's Assembly? So
the first thing is that I was also very bullish on the EFF in terms of how their performance would be in this election, because they had grown from 6 to 10. I saw the FNB event, 100,000 people, and having more people outside overflow. I was like, okay, this entity is growing. It has momentum. If you read the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the guy speaks about the law of the big mo, which is momentum. So I thought, okay, they have the big mo, even if the polls are saying they're not going to get particular numbers. I don't think that's correct. But this is pre-MK. I thought, okay, they're going to do well. Even when MK emerged, I thought, no, okay, Zuma's on the brand, but he's not going to parliament. And that could be a variable for them as well. So I do think that the dynamics have shifted since the FNB stadium. They've lost a little bit of percentage there, lost 300,000 votes, right? Because they were on 1.88, now they're on 1.53 million, and that is a loss, right? Most of that came from KZN, so it's not as big of a loss as people have been painting it out to be, but perception can become reality. So the first thing is that you lose that percentage. You no longer a 10% party, now you're a 9% party. So now narratives can be like, next time there'll be 6% party, or whatever the case may be. Then you start to have this exodus situation. Some of the exodus I wasn't as surprised by or even confused by, because when Advocate Bosuwe Mkhwebane left, I was like, okay, that makes sense. When Advocate Mpofu announced, I was like, well, he's been working with these guys for quite a bit. I'm also not surprised there. I mean, he's been with them from every court case he's been there. If he says this, it's not necessarily a surprise. Even to the EFF, it shouldn't be a surprise. When Zonele Manye left, I was like, well, you've always been a Zuma day one, right? And so if a new Zuma vehicle emerges, I wouldn't be surprised where you're like, guys, you know me, I was just waiting for Zuma to get his house in order. I'm going over there. But Floyd was a moment, right? And now there's speculation about Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. I think still up and down. We'll see what happens, because it's rumors, right? It's rumors, and some people behind the scenes are saying, no, it's for sure he's out, or whatever the case may be. So there's a second loss, is what I'm describing, is that the difficulty that they're going through is that there's a perception that they've lost support, and a perception that leaders at a key level are moving to a different entity. That can, if it was a company, it would hurt the company. If 5 execs quit a company at a particular moment, that affects the stock price as much as if they lose sales and their revenue goes down. So these are 2 challenging moments. I do think that the first thing that would need to happen is that the EFF needs to come out of conference with a clear leadership slate.
Yeah.
I'm not so bothered that Julius Malema gets a 3rd term or even a 4th term, because the reality, even if I look at French politics, Marine Le Pen, her dad ran that party for a very long period of time. And then so did she. And of course, there are issues there about their own, nepotism and stuff like that, which we can have a conversation about elsewhere. But the point I'm trying to make is when you're in opposition politics, you don't always have that luxury of 2 terms, then you rotate. Right? I don't think it's even strategic to have a strong player who's president of the party. You guys haven't even got an electoral success, and then now you are cycling the leaders. What if that other leader is your strongest brand, strongest speaker, strongest thinker, most connected, whatever the case may be? So I don't think they necessarily need to change Julius, but I do think they need to come out with a strong, diverse and talented leadership team after conference. And perhaps they're working on that, trying to figure out and suss out whether they have moles and how big is the Zuma threat, all of that. That's what's happening. But post this, and this is where I had a disagreement with some other analysts earlier in the year. They said that the EFF should become more mature, more demure. And I was like, no, I don't think that's actually what they need to do, because the challenges are still requiring an exuberant, militant, aggressive opposition, one that is open to marching, one that is open to disruption. The whole idea that you want Julius Malema to be a mellow fellow, I don't think actually is the right mix. Donald Trump tried to shift some of his campaign strategy in 2020. It lost him the election because he toned down some other things to be more presidential. This time, he came, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, the frogs, the logs, the cogs. He won, right? Some of the stuff that he was doing was so out there because, and now I'm not supporting the ideologies or the strategies or the tactics. I'm just speaking about the effectiveness. So I think if Julius wants to re-establish himself, he has to go back to the hits, the Julius Malema hits. Not this mellow fellow DJ guy. I don't think that necessarily is his thing. He has to go radical grassroots guy and pick radical grassroots fights again and try to get himself into that conversation. Right now, that space, curiously, has now been occupied by the ANC Youth League. They're the ones doing large marches, etc., etc. For me personally, one of the things I would have done, they didn't do it, but I would have done it if I was in the EFF before the election. I would have marched for Makate to Vodacom. I would have said, this monopoly capital institution is refusing to pay this black man his money. We're coming there.
You know, I would even I think the EFF and MK feud has taken on such proportions that it's starting to cloud the obvious low-hanging fruit, which is the coalition government. I would be doing something in Parliament about the GNU. I would be doing something about Phala Phala. I would be doing something about austerity, turning the conversation back to...
And potentially this is what they can do post this moment, because they have to go back. If you're a musician, you have to go back to your hits. If you in a... Whitney Houston, if she was in trouble financially, right, when her dad chowed the money and all of that stuff, I watched the I Want to Dance with Somebody or whatever the film is called.
Okay.
At some point, it's a good movie. She says, hey, we need to go back to the studio. I'm Whitney Houston. I can sing. That's my whole thing. Get me some songs that are well written. Put me in front of the mic. Let me sing my heart out. So that's what I do. If you're LeBron James and your team is in trouble, at some level, they got to pass the ball back to you. You're LeBron. The ability that you have is going to determine the future of your team. So what I'm trying to put across is that in Julius's own political journey, there are moments where he has had to get the ball passed to him to do what he has done. I think that the idea and the discourse that the best way to attract more middle-class Black South Africans is to become more demure is not necessarily the EFF formula for success. I'm not saying that they should become anarchists or violent or all of that, but I do think that there are opportunities for them to tap into their hits. But other people disagree. But this is what was the source of the disagreement, is I said, listen, now, especially now that they have competition, the unfortunate part of this whole discourse, this discourse around the left, is because the ANC is occupying almost a center-right economic position right now. They're a center-left party, but their economic offering right now is austerity, it's very center-right, it's privatization, very neoliberal. Unfortunately, because the left is then dominated by MK and EFF, and these guys are squabbling over who gets to be in leadership positions and all of that, the discourse is suffering. There is something worthwhile within leftist thinking. And I think sometimes we over-listen to the people from the right wing who are over-critical of everything that the left says. It's particularly in a country like South Africa, where there's been colonialism, racism, and apartheid. There are things that still need to be rectified. There is still inequality in schooling. There is still inequality in housing. There's still inequality and discrepancies and discrimination in access to finance. There are still issues that are happening on the continent. In Mozambique, democracy is failing. In Sudan, there's a war that is happening there. Black people are dying. In the DRC, exploitation of resources. South Africa plays a role in all of these entities and spaces and places. And if the left cannot speak about issues of progressive left agenda, some of the places and spaces where the voice of South Africa could have a bigger weight no longer have that weight, because the left in and of itself is either too insular, looking at organizational stuff and not looking at the societal stuff, or too caught up in these, battle for market share, as opposed to advancing the real stuff. And I think it's what makes these Santon left kids feel like there is no left, because there are these group of kids, these private school twangists who think that they are left because they know every AOC's Instagram, they've crammed it. Then they say, no, there's no left in South Africa because this other left. But what I'm trying to put across broadly is that left-leaning agenda then gets diluted and bastardized and cast aside. And when you consider the fact that the media in South Africa doesn't platform these views, there's no Guardian in South Africa. There's no Guardian. Some of these publications think that they're like the Guardian or the New York Times and that they platform leftist thinking and ideas. They don't. There's no Guardian. There's no New York Times. There's no platform like that. So what then happens is that these ideas are now left in the hands of the academics to push. And the academics don't have platforms. They're busy waiting for someone to cite their paper. And then these ideas then get lost. And this is one of the harms of this moment. And I think perhaps even this moment going into the next 2 years.
Well, Mighti Jamie, thank you for joining us. We wish you all the best on your MK journey. And
Gwaza.
But yeah, good luck with your platform. It's great to see the growth of that platform, and that, an infrastructure is being built of alternative media voices, which I think is sorely needed in our country, and yours is certainly one of them. So keep up the great work. And
thank you, and thank you for having me. And I think we do need to compete in ideas. We do need to compete in narratives. And we do need to honor the work of Sankara and Biko, who wrote what they liked and tried to conscientize the public. Malcolm X. There's a history of thinkers and scholars and voices who spoke, Walter Rodney, to the masses. And whether or not we agree with everything they said, that's besides the point. Those platforms were not platformed by the mainstream at the time. And I think our generation needs to have its own conversations. We can't rely on the conversations that are being had by 70-year-olds to guide us into the future that we want to create. And I love YouTube and social media because they are democratizing content. And I think I want more voices to even emerge in this space. I think that will be great for discourse on the continent.
Definitely. Like, share, subscribe to SMWX and the Dissection. Head over there and what's the next subscription goal? 50K.
Man.
Are you past
50K will
50K?
work. No, not there yet.
No,
That's what we're working
Let's get
to.
to 50K. Come on, people. We can take the Dissection to 50K. And let us know how you enjoyed this conversation in the comments. And thanks for keeping it locked on SMWX. Aye.